Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, the sharp sound cutting through the murmuring crowd like a guillotine. But Julian Vane didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't breathe as he watched the man he had devoted his entire existence to wrap a protective arm around the waist of a trembling, wide-eyed stranger. "It is a matter of duty, Julian," Lord Calenthorne said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly devoid of guilt, projecting to the gathered elite of the city's upper echelon. "You have been the perfect assistant, the perfect partner in business. But the Thorne bloodline requires a legacy that a beta simply cannot provide." The room spun. The gilded chandeliers of the Thorne estate, which Julian had personally selected 3 years ago, seemed to blur into halos of mocking light. Beside Kalen stood the Omega, a creature of soft edges, smelling of peaches and spring rain, clutching his stomach as if a precious jewel already resided there. Silas. That was his name. He was 22, naive, and possessed the one biological capability that Julian, despite 7 years of blood, sweat, and absolute loyalty, could never manifest. "I understand, my lord," Julian replied. His voice was steady, a testament to the iron discipline he had forged over a decade of service. He was a beta. He was built for endurance, not for the hysterical outbursts of an Omega or the aggressive posturing of an Alpha. He was the grounding wire. He was the silence in the storm. Kalen's eyes, the color of stormy seas, softened with a patronizing pity that hurt more than a slap. "I knew you would. You've always been pragmatic. You'll stay on as chief of staff, of course. Silas will need guidance on running the household, and the merger with the Eastern Distinct requires your oversight. Nothing truly changes between us, Julian. This is just biology. Nothing changes." The audacity of the statement nearly made Julian laugh, though the sound died in his throat, tasting of bile. 7 years. 7 years of warming Kalen's bed when the nightmares of the war came. 7 years of balancing the books, covering up scandals, negotiating treaties, and turning the Thorne family from a failing house into an empire. He wasn't just an employee. He wasn't just a bed warmer. He was the architect of Kalen's life. But to an Alpha obsessed with the archaic laws of inheritance, a Beta was merely a placeholder. A seat warmer until the real prize arrived. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, my lord," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave, cold enough to freeze the spilled champagne on the floor. Kalen frowned, his handsome brow furrowing. The scent of burnt cedar and ozone, Kalen's pheromones, spiked with irritation. "Don't be dramatic, Julian. We discussed this possibility years ago. You knew this day would come." "I knew you would marry," Julian corrected, taking a step back. "I did not know you would discard me while expecting me to train my replacement." "He is not your replacement," Kalen snapped, his alpha dominance leaking into his tone, causing the weaker guests nearby to shudder. "He is my Omega. You are my Beta. You have different roles." "Role," Julian repeated. He looked at Kalen, really looked at him, and for the first time in 7 years, he didn't see the man he loved. He saw a spoiled child sitting on a throne built of Julian's bones. "My role has concluded." Julian turned on his heel. "Walk away, and you leave with nothing." Kalen roared, the veneer of civility cracking. "No severance. No references. You will be nothing in this city without the Thorne name." Julian paused at the heavy oak doors. He didn't look back. He simply adjusted the cuff of his suit, a suit he bought himself, and spoke into the sudden silence. "I was the one who made the Thorne name mean something, Kalen. Good luck keeping it that way." The rain in the city of Oakhaven was relentless, a curtain of gray washing away the filth of the streets, but never quite touching the corruption in the high towers. 3 months had passed since the engagement party. Julian sat in a small, dimly lit cafe in the lower district, nursing a cup of black coffee. He looked tired. The crisp, tailored suits of the Thorne estate were gone, replaced by a simple woolen coat and a charcoal turtleneck. He had lost weight, the sharp angles of his cheekbones more pronounced, giving him an ethereal, haunted beauty that drew eyes despite his beta status. He checked his watch. He was waiting for a recruiter from a mid-level logistics firm. It was a humiliating step down for the man who had effectively run the western seaboard's trade routes, but Kalen had made good on his threat. Julian had been blacklisted. Every major corporation had slammed their doors in his face, fearful of the Thorn wrath. The bell above the cafe door chimed, bringing with it a gust of freezing wind and a presence that instantly sucked the air out of the room. The chatter in the cafe died. The barista froze. It wasn't the mid-level recruiter. Standing in the doorway was a man who looked like he had been carved from obsidian and moonlight. He was tall, broader than Kalen, with eyes of piercing, unnatural violet. He wore a long black trench coat that cost more than the building they were sitting in. Duke Dastian Blackwood, the Viper of the North, the sworn enemy of the Thorn family. Julian's grip on his coffee cup tightened, his knuckles turning white. Why was he here? Dastian Blackwood didn't visit lower district cafes. He didn't visit anywhere unless he intended to burn it down or buy it. Dastian scanned the room, his gaze landing on Julian with the precision of a predator locking onto prey. He walked over, the sound of his heavy boots echoing on the wooden floorboards. He didn't ask for permission. He simply pulled out the chair opposite Julian and sat down. "You look terrible, Vane," Dastian said. His voice was deep, a gravelly rumble that vibrated in Julian's chest. Unlike Kalen's aggressive cedar scent, Dashton's pheromones were tightly controlled, a subtle hint of cold steel and dark chocolate that was strangely intoxicating. "Your Grace," Julian acknowledged, his face a mask of indifference. "If you're here to gloat about the Thorn stock plummeting, you can do it elsewhere. I'm no longer associated with that house." "I know," Dastian said, signaling the terrified waitress for a coffee. "I've been watching the plummet with great interest. Thorn lost 3 major contracts in the last month. The laborers are threatening to strike. And rumor has it, the perfect Omega he married cries every time the quarterly reports come in." Julian took a sip of his coffee to hide the flicker of satisfaction. "That is unfortunate." "Is it?" Dastian leaned forward, resting his chin on his gloved hand. "It seems like poetic justice to me. Thorn thought the Empire ran on alpha charisma. He forgot it ran on beta competence." "What do you want, Blackwood?" Julian asked, tired of the games. "I have an interview in 10 minutes. "No, you don't. I bought the logistics firm this morning and canceled all interviews," Dastian said casually. Julian stared at him. "You bought the firm just to cancel my interview?" "I don't like sharing talent," Dastian replied, his violet eyes darkening. "And I certainly don't like seeing a diamond being used to shovel coal." He reached into his coat and slid a thick envelope across the table. It was made of heavy, cream-colored paper, sealed with the Blackwood crest in black wax. "What is this?" "A contract," Dastian said. "Full autonomy. Name your salary. You report only to me. Your job is simple. Do for the House of Blackwood what you did for Thorn. But with one crucial difference." Julian hesitated, his finger hovering over the seal. "And what is that?" "I don't want a servant," Dastian said, his gaze dropping to Julian's lips for a fraction of a second before returning to his eyes. "And I don't need a bed warmer. I have plenty of willing partners for that. I need a partner who can think. I need a ruthless, cold-blooded tactician who wants to see Kalen Thorn beg for mercy." Dastian smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was a shark's grin. "I hear you have a motive." Julian looked at the envelope. He thought of the 7 years he had wasted. He thought of Silas, pregnant and pampered, living in the house Julian had curated. He thought of Kalen's dismissal. Asterisk nothing changes. This is just biology. Asterisk Julian broke the seal. "I have conditions. I expect nothing less." 6 months later, the social season culminated in the winter solstice masquerade, held at the Royal Palace. It was the event of the year, where alliances were forged, and enemies smiled at each other over crystal flutes of ambrosia. The ballroom was a sea of color and noise. Kalen Thorn stood near the center, a glass of wine in his hand, looking exhausted. The last half year had been a nightmare. The guidance he expected Julian to leave behind didn't exist. Julian had kept most of the critical operational details in his head. Silas, while sweet and heavily pregnant with the heir Kalen had wanted so badly, was utterly useless in matters of state or business. He required constant reassurance, constant attention, and his pheromones, once sweet, had become cloying and suffocating to Kalen. "My lord, the Western trade deal falling through has cost us millions," his new assistant, a nervous young alpha, whispered in his ear. The investors are asking questions. Tell them to wait. Kalen snapped, rubbing his temples. He missed the silence. He missed the way a cup of tea would just appear when he had a headache, perfectly brewed. He missed the sharp, dry wit that challenged him. He missed Julian. A hush fell over the room. The great doors swung open, and the herald announced, His Grace, Duke Dastian Blackwood. Kalen sneered. He hated Dastian. But as the Duke descended the grand staircase, Kalen's breath hitched. Dastian was not alone. Walking beside the towering Duke, his hand resting lightly on Dastian's forearm, was a vision in midnight blue velvet. The suit was cut to perfection, hugging a lean, graceful frame. A silver mask covered the upper half of his face, but Kalen knew that mouth. He knew the elegant line of that throat. It was Julian. But not the Julian he knew. The Julian he knew was modest, blending into the background in grays and beiges. This Julian was radiant. He wore a single earring, a black diamond that caught the light. He carried himself not like a secretary, but like a consort. Like a king. The crowd parted for them. Dastian whispered something to Julian, and Julian threw his head back and laughed. A genuine, throaty sound Kalen hadn't heard in years. Dastian looked at Julian with an expression of possessive pride, his hand sliding to the small of Julian's back, staking a claim that was unmistakable. Rage, hot and blinding, erupted in Kalen's chest. He shoved his glass into his assistant's hand and marched across the floor. Julian. The music didn't stop, but the people nearby did. They sensed the pheromones of an angry alpha and scattered. Julian stopped and turned slowly. The silver mask hid his eyes, but the set of his jaw was coolly amused. Lord Thorne. You look stressed. What is the meaning of this? Kalen demanded, ignoring Dastian entirely. You disappear for months and then show up on the arm of him? Careful, Thorne, Dastian warned, his voice a low growl. The air around them grew heavy, the pressure of a dominant alpha crushing down. You are speaking to my chief strategist. And my partner. Partner. Kalen scoffed, looking Julian up and down with a mix of hunger and disgust. Is that what we're calling it now? I suppose a beta has to sell whatever he has to survive. The slap was so fast Kalen didn't see it coming. It wasn't physical. It was verbal. I didn't sell anything, Kalen, Julian said softly, stepping closer, invading the alpha's space without a hint of fear. I was acquired by someone who knows the difference between value and price. In 6 months, the Blackwood estate has doubled its net worth. Your estate has lost 40%. Who is the whore here? Me, or the man who married a womb to save a legacy he's too incompetent to manage? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kalen's face turned purple. You watch your mouth. You are a beta. You are nothing without an alpha to protect you. And that, Dastian interjected, stepping between them, his violet eyes glowing with menace, is why you lost him. You think protection means ownership. I don't protect Julian because he is weak. I protect him because he is precious. And unlike you, I don't need him to breed to make me a man. Kalen trembled, his fists clenching. He looked at Julian, desperate now. Julian, please. This is madness. Come back. Silas. Silas doesn't understand the accounts. The house is a mess. I can set you up in the guest wing. We can go back to how it was. The silence that followed was heavy with history. Julian looked at the man he had loved for 7 years. He saw the desperation, the selfishness. Go back, Julian asked, tilting his head. To waiting in the shadows? To being your secret? To watching you parade your real life while I fix your mistakes? Julian reached up and untied his mask, letting it fall to the floor. His eyes were dry and clear. I wasted 7 years trying to be enough for you, Kalen. It took me leaving to realize that I was always too much for you. Julian turned back to Dastian, his expression softening into something genuine. Shall we, Dastian? The air here is stale. Dastian smirked, a cruel, victorious thing directed solely at Kalen. After you, my love. As they walked away, leaving Kalen standing amidst the ruins of his dignity, Kalen felt a sharp pain in his chest, a hollowness that no heir, no legacy, and no title could ever fill. He watched the man who had been his spine, his heart, and his mind walk out of the door and into the night with a monster who treated him like a queen. And in the silence of the crowded ballroom, Kalen Thorne finally understood the true cost of his ambition. The carriage ride back to the Blackwood estate was quiet. Julian leaned back against the plush leather seats, the adrenaline fading, leaving him exhausted. Dastion watched him from the opposite seat. You were magnificent. I was cruel, Julian murmured, looking out the window at the passing city lights. He deserved cruelty. Sometimes, the only way to heal a wound is to cauterize it. Dastion leaned forward, his large hand covering Julian's on his knee. The heat was grounding. Do you regret it? Julian looked at Dastion. He looked at the man who had given him power, respect, and a voice. He thought of Kaelin, alone in a crowded room. No, Julian whispered. My only regret is that I didn't do it sooner. Dastion's thumb stroked the back of Julian's hand. Then let us look forward. The night is young, and we have an empire to run. Julian smiled, and for the first time in 7 years, it reached his eyes. Yes, we do, and that is how the discarded beta became the king of the underworld, leaving the prince to rot in his ivory tower. If you enjoyed seeing Julian finally take his crown and leave his toxic past behind, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, is loyalty worth more than a bloodline? Or would you have forgiven Kaelin if he begged? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,